Hey, welcome to the sew along for Amara. So this is the one that we're going to be sewing right now, like literally right now. So the sew along is split into 3 parts. Part 1 covers all of the outer. Part 2 covers just the divider pocket, which is there, and the gusset attached to the divider pocket. Then part 3 is the lining body and all the final construction. So 3 videos split up nicely. So that's this one. This is the one from the instructions in all her loveliness. It is made of foam just to give it a bit of support. One of the testers made it out of fusible fleece, which makes it a little bit slouchy, but it still works just as well. So if you are worried about your machine not handling the thickness of foam, try it with fusible fleece. The only other thickness is this bit here, because you've got the seam and then you've got the strap, and you sew across all those layers together. Obviously we've managed to cut out the thickness at the bottom, but there is a little bit of thickness here, so that's one thing to think of when choosing fabrics. But otherwise this is classed as an intermediate sew because there are some technical parts, there's lots of fiddly bits, but I'm sure you can do it. So there we go, here we go, let's get straight into it. So before we start, let's talk fabrics. So you will have 2 of the accent and 2 outer on the B shape, and then the mirror image to that is 4 and 4. And then what this allows us to do is ideally you will have used non-directional fabric, and this way if you look at that and think, oh actually I quite fancy these being this way, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter which you want to do, or even if you wanted that around there. You see where I'm going? Non-directional fabric works best because then you can have a real play about what you're doing. If you decide, however, that you want to use directional fabric, then what I suggest, I highly recommend, I've got this one here, printing out a second piece or tracing around it on a piece of plain paper. And then you've got, actually that one goes with that one. You've got 2 the same. And then you can decide, that I want the bottoms to be out of the outer fabric. And then you might say, for accent out the top. And then you know which orientation to cut them. And the same as if you wanted to do that with the B, if you decide that you wanted your accent one way, print out another one. Super simple to do that, and then you won't get lost or think, what am I doing? What I will say though is make sure that you cut both of these fabrics from either the right side or both from the wrong side, because if you cut one from the reverse, you're going to have too many of one and not enough of the other. That's all I'm going to say on that matter. Non-directional fabric is best, especially when it comes to like zipper, I forgot what it's called now, the bridge, and for just messing around. But yeah, let's get stuck in. So I have made one panel already, which is why I don't have enough pieces. What you need to do is make sure you've got matches So you would have 4 sets of this side, 2 sets of this side. And then you place them right sides together. When they're right sides together, they obviously don't match up. If they match up, it's going to be wrong. We're going to do them all at the same time. So grab all of your pieces. You should have 12 pieces all together that make 6 sets. And you can see that some angle one way and some angle the other way, and that is okay. And I'm going to sew them together using regular seam allowance. So down here, down there, down there. Regular seam allowance to join them together. So once you've sewn them together, what we're going to do is open them up and push your seams towards whichever is the thinner fabric. So I've got a cotton and a faux leather. So I'm pushing the seam allowances towards the cotton rather than have the thick seam of the folded faux leather. And press if your fabric allows. Apologies if this is wobbling, I have got a crazy wobbly table. And then we're going to top stitch alongside the seam on the thinner side to hold everything in place, and do this on all 6 pieces. Like I said, I've only got 3. Do this on all 6. So I have sewn my panels here, and you want to split them up so you've got like this. So I've got 2 of the same and then 1 of the opposite. I'm going to put the opposite one in the middle, and you will notice that it joins up like this. It won't join up any other way. You see, that was just wrong. So 2 of the same on the outside and the opposite one in the middle. And this is where you can decide now where you're going. Are you going to go with it half and half like this, or going to go for the harlequin effect? I have put this one together. So I've gone for the harlequin effect on this one. This is what we're aiming for. So arrange them as you desire. Take the middle one, pop it on top of the left side. And we're going to sew down this right edge using seam allowance. And once we're sewn together, we're going to open up these seam allowances, suppress them if you're able, otherwise you're going to have to kind of smush them together. If your points don't match up, don't stress about it, because it's going to be hidden. Now we're opening the seams and we're going to top stitch either side. This isn't decorative, this is purely to help this panel stay flat. Because if you don't do the seams, then you're going to end up with this like little hump. So open the seam allowances, press if you're able, and then top stitch either side to hold those seam allowances in place. You're only seeing like that much of the seam allowance behind the handle. So don't stress. Make that your best top stitching ever. Don't worry about the rest. It's purely there to hold everything flat. Like so. And then just check that obviously you've got it the right way around. as you can see, that's the wrong way, that's the right way. And then we're going to do the same again, but using this right side piece. So flip it onto here, sew together down this right side edge, open it up, top stitch the seams open like we've done here. There we go, like that. So that is another panel done, and we just need to shape the corners with our absolutely wondrous corner guide. So decide which way you wanted to do it. I'm going to make it the same as this one, which is with the accented fabric in the corners. I'm going to do it on the wrong side purely because it wipes off on the faux leather. Like that. So I've just drawn it on. There we go. We should have two identical panels. The handles we will do once this is on foam, so we won't do the handles yet. So set these aside for now. So we are going to move on to the outer gusset. First of all, we need to prep our side pieces with the strap connectors. This bag does have handles on the kind of the long sides, front and back. Also has a strap. Love it. So we need to make two of what looks like this. And to do that, grab your strap connector, find the long center line. So I've measured and marked mine because it's faux leather. Or you could, if your fabric allows, fold it in half, press, and then you'll have like a crease. Or measure and mark again, whichever's up to you. And then you're going to bring the long sides in to meet this center line. I highly recommend faux leather using a double-sided tape. Or if your fabric allows, you could press again, and you'll end up with a 1 inch wide strap connector. Once you've done both and have them folded, you can then go ahead and top stitch down all long sides using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And then when we attach them together, we're going to sew between the 1/4 inch and the edge. Okay, so first things first, 1/4 inch on all long sides. I'll do this one in a second, but I'll show you this one. So flip it over, wrong side. I'm going to measure and mark 6 inches down from the top edge. As it's non-directional fabric, pick any edge to be the top. And then slide on your D-ring. I'm actually going to use triangle rings because that's what I have. And then, where did I put my tape? I ran out of the good stuff, so I'm just using this thin tape, which does absolutely nothing. But it might just hold this in place for a second. So you'll have a strap connector now that measures 8 inches. Like like so. I'm going to center it on this side piece. So it's angled. There's a short side and a longer short side. If you're unsure, just bring them together just to check. And then you'll know which way is up. And we're going to center this on here. It's so much easier to do if you have like a cutting mat. Sorry, my thingy was wonky. A cutting mat. If you don't have a cutting mat, you'll also use a quilting ruler, because this has the lines on it too. So I'm just prepping it here. I can see that these lines are at the edges, which means that line is my center. And again, totally rubbish tape, but it'll have to do until I go to Hobbycraft again. So I am literally doing this by eye. You can mark it if necessary. If you have extra rulers, you can just double check that that's lovely and lined up. Now, as I said, we're going to sew these together between the stitch line that we've already made and the outer edge. Go as close as you are comfortable to this D-ring. Obviously, if you've got a really wide foot on your machine, you won't get as close. I'm going to make sure mine are even, so I'm actually going to, I've measured 3/4 of an inch down from this top edge here. Like I said, go wherever. If you want to sew right up there, do it. If you want to go down here and then maybe add a rivet later, cool. But we're going to sew these together. So using a top stitch, but using a regular stitch length. So up, across your market if you have one, and back down again. Do this on both of these so that you have 2 identical side pieces. So off camera, I'm gonna magic this one together, and then I'll come back with 2 identical sewn pieces. I have 2 identical side pieces, and we can start to construct the outer gusset. So grab your base piece. The stabilizer for this piece is actually sewn to the foam, and that way we can make sure it's not in the seam allowances, it's kind of floating, as you will. So take one side piece and lay it right side together, and you'll notice that the widths match up. If it doesn't, and it looks like that, it's the wrong way. So, I'm going to do this right sides together. Now, in the instructions, we do one at a time. If you want to, feel free to save yourself time. I'll put the other side on. If I wasn't following instructions, this is what I do. So you've got them matching right sides together, matching the widths, and we're going to sew down this side and this side using seam allowance, regular seam allowance. Right, so you've either got one sewn in place or you've got both. However you've done it, next up we need to do a top stitch. So you want the seam allowances to face towards the base, and then this way the connector isn't folded back on itself. So seam allowances towards the base, and we're going to top stitch alongside the side of the seam. and the same again on this side. So no matter which way you do it, whether it's one at a time or two together, we're top stitching on the base side of the seam with all seam allowances facing towards the base, like that. So joined together, we now have our outer gusset. So grab your outer gusset and your two outer panels and lay them on the foam and cut round them. With the gusset piece, try and cut it to the actual shape. I know sometimes we just kind of trim around because it doesn't matter, but try your best to cut this one to the actual shape. And I will show you why in just a jiffy. Let's just do our trimming for a second. So once you've cut round your foam pieces, take the gusset one, and we need to add that floating bit of stabilizer that we're on about. So you need to find the center of the long edge. If you have a huge cutting mat or a ruler, you can do it that way. I'm going to do mine this way, if I can find where I've just put my pen. Nope, it's disappeared. It was underneath the stabilizer. So I'm lightly folding the piece in half. Dropping it on the floor, picking it up and trying again. And then I'm just going to transfer these markings on to the foam. This doesn't have to be an exact science. It doesn't have to be bang on mill perfect. So don't worry about that. And I've got my base stabilizer. And I've also measured halfway on the long sides. What we're going to do is place these together. So I'm matching up these center markers, and I'm also making sure that this gap is even on both sides. And then we're going to sew them together. It doesn't matter where you sew it, whether it's on the edge, a little bit in, you use a long stitch length, a short one. It honestly doesn't matter too much. I'm going for a longish one, and I'm going about a top stitch width in. So we are going to sew this together. Feel free to use a double-sided tape, pin it if you can. Stop it shifting, but yeah, let's sew these together. So I have attached them together, as you can see, and now we can put our gusset back with the foam. See, I've got the stabilizer on this side. I'm actually going to flip it, because like here you can't feel it. Because we have this edge in this corner, I can kind of feel it there. I don't know, it's just a little bugbear of mine. So match it up like we have lots of clips. Then all we need to do before we're sewing the fabric to the foam pieces is fold back the fabric and cut off the corners. And this is when we sew these pieces together, we don't have all that extra foam in the layers. It's just not needed. And I haven't clipped these yet because this one takes ages to clip, and I'll save you from that. So carefully then you can go ahead and sew the 2 outer pieces and the outer gusset to their foam within the seam allowance, so at a rough 1/4 inch seam allowance, and then we'll do some trimming after. This is a much easier job if you don't use pointy scissors. My blunt-ended scissors, I think I took to a craft fair on the weekend, so goodness knows where they are now. But I have cut the seam allowance away for all 3 pieces. Before we put everything together, we just need to add our handles. So take your handly pieces. Oh, let me just scooch in. I have one pre-made. So actually I have them in various states of making. So you have 2 outer pieces and 2 accent pieces. The accent pieces are smaller or shorter than the outer, because when we sew them together you're not going to see the accent. So like this much behind the handle, it is just a waste. So we only need to put it where we can see it really. So as we did with the strap connectors, find your long centre lines, and then we're going to bring the long raw edges in to meet the centre line, and you can either press them like I've done with this fabric, or you can use double-sided tape like I will do with the faux leather. But like I said, I have run out. I've only got the thin stuff. It doesn't stick very well. It's the right jumble. Once you have yours secured as best you can, find the long centres. So you could fold them in half, obviously once it's folded, and make a mark on the wrong side, and do that with this one as well. Make a mark, and then you're going to join them together. So you've got this gap either end. Yes, I must have mismarked mine somehow. I'm not really worried. It's too late now anyways. So yours should hopefully be matched up better than mine is. And then what you're going to do is sew them together, but sew all the way down the long side using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So pretty much the same again as what we did with the strap connectors. So sew them down both ends, and you're sewing the pieces together. Don't worry about these raw edges because they are going to be hidden. Don't worry. And you can do that with both. I'm just going to put mine to the side for a second and grab one of my outer panels. And what we're going to do is grab some of this. If you... No, we're not doing that. I'm skipping ahead. Skipping. I sat down, but I'm skipping ahead. So, before we put this on to the outer panel, we just need to make a box, because obviously, like we did with the side connector, we sewed up, down and back again. That leaves this bit in the middle unsewn, and we don't want that. So I am measuring 8.5 inches in from the end. So You can use erasable fabric marker or washi tape. And what I'm going to do is this 1/4 inch line and the edge, I'm going to sew a box between the line and the edge. I'm going to go down here to this marker, across, down to the marker and back. So we're doing a rectangle. So almost completing this, well, we are completing this part of the strap. Handle, it's not a strap, it's a handle. You can imagine how much fun I had writing this pattern. We're making a box. I'll do mine, then I'll show you what I've done. Right, there we go. I have sewn the box, so you can see where I have sewn and where I haven't sewn. Now we can grab the outer panel and our totally useful double-sided tape. And this time, oh my god, I made such a pickle. I must be hungry. I'm doing things out of sequence. I'm measuring 8 inches from the end. And this makes our marker for our sewing like we did on the connector. The handle is going to run up the centre seam. So this is what I mean when I said don't worry about your top stitching, because you won't be able to see it. I'm just going to put some clips at the top to make sure that it stays straight. Now when you're doing the other side, just make sure that the handle isn't twisted in any way. So no twists, all good. There should be a nice 1/2 inch between these markers. And then what we're going to do is sew up between our 1/4 inch line and the edge. So sew up, across the marker and back down again, and do this for both ends of this handle. There you go. So I have sewn, just check you can actually see this, up there, across and back down again. So you have this little gap. This is a perfect spot for a rivet if you're going to use them. So we'll make 2 identical side panels, not side panels, outer body panels. I'm definitely hungry. Just like this, 2 identical. And once you've done that, feel free to add rivets. Like I said, I'm going to put mine bang in the middle there. And I'm also going to add some for the strap connector, because I've got a big gap from the top fold to here. I'm going to put mine just above. Feel free to whack loads in there. I mean, it's your design. Also, if you want to measure this first, do that too. So once you have two identical outer body panels, rivets if you wish, we can go on to construction. I'm going to go and find something to eat so that this is made in the right way. And I'll join you back in a second. So once you've added your, there you go, rivets and things, we can go ahead and start constructing. So you need to mark the bottom edge of both outer body panels. So if you have a cutting mat, that is the easiest way to do. Otherwise you can lightly fold. You may have already marked the long sides of the gusset when you went to do the foam bit. If you haven't, again, cutting mat. If you don't have a big cutting mat, you can measure from this seam to this seam and get the centre. That's a nice easy way of doing it. I appreciate that it is dark. It is so hot right now. Everywhere I'm trying to keep shaded, but it does mean that hopefully I can lighten up the video. So grab one of your outer body panels. I'm going to lay these right sides together, matching up the marks made. Then bring around, matching up the tops. And then you should find that the corners go in beautifully, nicely. These are real easy corners on this one. And then all we're going to do is sew these pieces together around here using seam allowance. There we go. So they're sewn together. And then we just need to put this remaining outer body panel matching up the markers. And we're literally doing the same again. There we go. And we're going to sew them together again using seam allowance. There we go. It's completely done, and if you want to, you can trim the seam allowance. I'm taking like a half off. What I'm not cutting is this top bit, so that when we open the seam mounted later, there's something to open. It just makes it a little easier. So you could do your cutting so much more neater than me. I am going for speed right now. There we go. So we are going to keep this as it is, right side in, but I'm just going to show you what I've got. Looking pretty darn lush so far. Now, there aren't bag feet in the pattern, but if you wanted to add any, feel free to add some at any point during the construction. I always add mine after, when I've got a look at it, because there's nothing worse than measuring it all out and then things shift and then they just don't line up. So there's 4 inches between there, and that is 4.5. So the center of mine is there. So if I wanted to put a foot, I could put one there. And then say if I went 5 inches from that center, I went 1 inch in from the seam and 1 inch in from the seam. So again, 5 inch in from the seam. So that is where, if I was going to do bag feet, I would put my 5 bag feet. So I've got 1 in the center. I've used these things here, what am I calling it? The handles, to level them up. 1, and then I've gone 5 inches out, 1 in, 1 in, 5 that way, 1 in, 1 in. Obviously, do whatever works for you. I find 4 is not enough because it sags in the middle. 5 is a good amount. So if you want to add feet, you could always mark them, cut the holes, depends on if you're using the Chicago screws or the prongs, and then fit them at the end. You can add them now, but then they kind of get in the way. This is why I do add mine later, but there is an option there if you want to add little feet. I'm going to cut my holes. I don't actually know if I have feet. That is another thing. All depends on if you actually have feet. But I like to cut mine now and then install them later. But that is video 1. That is outer bag construction. Feel free to join me over at video 2, where we will do the divider pocket. That's when the fun starts. See you in a minute.